The armistice was asked for by the German High Command. The German High Command had kept the civilian government virtually in the dark about what was happening on the battlefields, and the German public remained in the dark about what was happening on the battlefields, unless you were very perspicacious and actually looked at the map and saw where German victories were happening and noticed that German victories were happening closer and closer to the German border. You didn't really understand that Germany and German troops were being defeated on the battlefields and retreating back towards Germany's borders in the west. The civilian government, which had been kept really in the dark by the military, who effectively had established a sort of military dictatorship in Germany, was suddenly told at the end of September, the situation is desperate, you must get an armistice immediately. This is something they later denied. Ludendorff and Hindenburg, the two great commanders, panicked and demanded the civilian government, suddenly threw it back in the laps of the civilian government and said, you must get an armistice immediately. And Ludendorff, the great big brave general, put on civilian clothes and scuttled off to Sweden wearing dark glasses and false whiskers. He was noticed at the railway stations, rather an obvious figure. Woodrow Wilson possibly at this point made a mistake, and it's easy to criticize him in retrospect, but he negotiated with the civilian government who had been thrown this responsibility. And it has been argued, and I think interestingly, in a recent book by George Leonhard, A History of the First World War, that Wilson should have insisted on negotiating with the generals who had effectively been running Germany. As it was, by negotiating with the civilian government to make an armistice, the generals were let off the hook, and the High Command later on were able to say that the armistice was none of their making, they hadn't wanted it, that it was the civilian government that had actually lost its nerve.